So who doesn't like top water? Seriously, I don't know an angler that doesn't like catching fish on surface lures. It's my favorite method of fishing, and today we're going to talk about my favorite lure. It's the lure that's on top of the on-top market, the OSP Bent Minnow. And I've got a retrieve that's unique to it, and it's going to increase your chances of success on top water. Let's get into it. Right, so welcome to the Surface Lure Challenge episode. Now, the Bent Minnow is actually the only surface lure in our Lure Challenge series, and I'm pretty excited about it. It's my favorite method of fishing. Now, fundamentally, there's a few things about surface lure fishing that I love. I feel as though a lot of the fishing and a lot of the technique is about the angler themselves and the lure and the way that you're able to coach the fish out of its hidey hole to come up, expose itself to the risks and the elements and the predators and smash your lure. So I find it the most rewarding and enjoyable out of all the techniques out there, and I want you to also. So today we're going to go through the lure itself, talk about some of the techniques, talk about the 3 ways that I rig the lure. And if you're a tournament fisherman, I reckon the Bent Minnow is one of the strongest or most capable lures in your arsenal for finding fish. I rig it a special way for when I'm doing that, and I'll talk about that in the video. I'll describe the lure and talk about the environmental conditions when the lure works best. I'm also going to break down my surface lure technique that I use for Bent minnows specifically, and I hope it's going to increase your hookup rate. Like always in the videos, I'm going to have some nice tasty treats for you. Here's the first one. Right, so the OSP Bent Minnow is one of my favorite lures, and I rig it first way. The first way I call stock mode, and this is it straight out of the pack with the trebles on both hook points. Let's have a look at it. Now, this is actually my second favorite way to use it. It's designed the way the manufacturer wants it to sit, and it works really, really well. I know some guys advocate for these lighter weighted Japanese, I think they're called Daichi, D-A-I-I-C-I trebles. They're nickel plated, and whilst they're awesome, I have heard reports the treble's not holding up in terms of corrosion. Now, they are super, super sharp. They're awesome straight out of the pack. They work in salt water, and side by side with the decoys, I thought I'd give them a bit of a test. So here we are now. I'm going to drop them into a cup of salted water. I'm also going to do the same on the decoys next to it, and I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it for a couple of days, and I'll put the results side by side at the back side. Either way, I spoke to the guys at Fish Tech who have bought the lure, and they reckon stock mode is the way to go. It comes specifically designed. That's why OSP want it to move around and float, and I reckon it's a good way to go. But like I said, it is my second favorite way. My favorite way to rig them is stinger mode. Now, like the name suggests, I move the center hook point to a stinger-based system. Now, the reason for that, the number of times that I've seen a fish grab either this spot here or this spot here, have it in its mouth, and then go swim away with it, and the line goes taut, and then it goes pop straight out of the mouth, or in the center, pop straight out of the mouth as they swim away. It's been a bit noticeable to me. It doesn't always happen. It particularly happens with the smaller fish. But I found that the stinger hooks help me with that specific hookup rate. Now, if I have a quick look in it and I zoom in here, you can see I've just grabbed, I think it's a Blade Echo Gear ZX stinger hook, and I've just towed it onto the midpoint. I've still kept the split ring on there so that it's got some movement, but I found that over the years I've minimized that scenario and increased the hookup rates by adding that. Now, I can't quantify it statistically, but I will say this. If I am using or planning to use the Bent Minnow in a tournament scenario, and I need to maximize my bites on that particular given day, I am going straight for my stinger hook variant as opposed to the stock mode variant. Now the third mode is for anyone that's looking to get into tournaments or increase their pre-fish effectiveness, and I call it pre-fish mode. Effectively, I take my bent minnow and I take the 2 trebles off it. I honestly believe that the bent minnow is the best finding lure when it comes to estuary species. And let me explain that. If I take the trebles off, I smack some scent on it, I peg it out a giant distance and I retrieve it in a certain way, and then I get boils, hits, takes, whatever. It tells me 2 things. The first, I've found active feeding fish that are probably going to be active and feeding the next day. The second, I don't actually hook them. I leave them there so that they're still going to look for this thing, this pattern, whatever it is, the next day. It gives me a lot of information. Not only that, but that fish is being quite aggressive, so it's primed, it's ready. I'm hitting that mark button and I'm coming back the next day. So stay with me for a moment. There's a couple more things I want to cover and then we're going to get into the lure technique. So if we cast it into the water, this is how it sits. You'll see it's a banana-like shape, so it presents like an injured prey. I like to think it looks like a bait fish with a busted swim bladder, or maybe like a munted stretched out prawn if you're considering the prawn pattern. Now, my first caution, the majority of things in Australia in terms of estuary preyed fish will eat things on the surface. We've got a lot of bugs and cicadas and whatnot. That means tailor and pike, and it also means the potential to lose your lure to some sharp teeth. The thing that I haven't mentioned so far is the cost. They're 38 bucks. And we know that tailor are bloody nuisance fish. So if you're not careful about it, you can end up losing $38 after $38 after $38, and nobody wants to do that. Now I want to talk about line class and how heavy your leader should be, given that this is a $38 lure. Now there is a theory out there that says that because we're working a lure so hard and we're making so much noise, that the line in front of the lure is less important. And I think if you're talking about a pure surface lure like this Dog-X Medina bone, you are 100% right. I do personally think though that if you do that on a bent minnow, you're not completely capitalizing. You still definitely will get fish, particularly when the bent minnow is being worked on the surface, but maybe not necessarily when you're choosing to go subsurface. And that's the real strength of the bent minnow. I think if you go heavy, you're probably disadvantaging yourself just a little bit. Let me explain. Some days it's really easy to convince a fish to come out, particularly on the overcast, a little bit of wind breaking the surface. But on the sky blue, no wind, no cloud, sun in the sky days, it can be really challenging to convince the fish to come out and hit that thing. Particularly when the birds are out already, that fish is just sitting there as prey. It's on those days that the bent minnow comes into its own. You can cast it out there, attract the fish on the surface, and then once you see the fish is following it or the fish is being tentative about it, start to tap it down, work it subsurface, and all of a sudden you've gone from having a fish looking up at a lure on the surface where there's a danger area to having the lure right in front of the fish's mouth, into its eyes, and then bang. There's less convincing to do. That is a finesse presentation, and if you're talking finesse, 10, 12, 14 pound leader doesn't fit that presentation. So for me, personally, it's 4 pounder on my bent minnows every time. Typically 2 rod lengths. If I want it to stay subsurface a little bit more, I go 3. If I want it to stay a little bit more surface, I probably drop that to around about 1 rod length. Now there'll be a bunch of differing opinions on that theory, and that's okay. But I think we could probably all agree, if losing a $38 lure is your main clutch for going to a heavier line, you probably shouldn't be throwing that $38 lure. And that's okay also, because there's a bunch of other lures out there that are going to get you fish. Right, so let's get into the technique, but I did promise you details of the giveaway. So the next episode, we're gonna do the VX35 Echo Gear Blade in the 445 color, which is the black one, and it catches fish over and over and over. Gear that you use with that lure is actually really important. So I'm gonna give away a... Rightio, so we've had some late mail. Now the video's cut, it is done. But the guys that import OSP Bent Minnows from Fish Tech Solutions are getting behind the video. So, if you do the things that I'm about to mention in the video, I'm also going to enter you into a second comp. That second comp is going to be a giveaway of 10 OSP Bent Minnows. That's what, 350, 380 bucks worth of gear. So get involved. So big thanks to those guys. Let's get back into it. The gear that you use with that lure is actually really important. So I'm going to give away a Miller rod valued at 545 bucks. It is the Miller Rod Blade Freak. I love this rod and I've got 2 of them in my arsenal. So if you comment down below on your favorite OSP Bent Minnow color, I'm going to give you an extra 2 entries to that comp that'll come out in a fortnight. As always, hit the subscribe button, smash the like, and write a comment down below. Remember, what's your favorite OSP Bent Minnow color? So I'm going to show you some footage of these techniques as we go along, but there are 3 main principles I want you to understand. The first one is, if there's feature on the ground, stop the lure when it arrives at that feature. The second, I want multiple fish to see my lure. So the way that I'm working it is noisy. I want those active feeding fish to see the lure, to fight over my lure, and to smash it. Third, I only throw back in that same patch of water if I saw sign the first time. If there's no sign, I don't waste my time, I move on, and I'm looking for that feeding fish. All right, so I'm gonna whiteboard here. I'm gonna talk this out and show you some stuff as we go. Say we're on a sand-based flat and these green areas are weed, and this is effectively where we wanna fish. I'll position myself in my boat so that I've got the wind behind me. I'll then peg the cast out as far as I can. Now, if the lure's landed on top of a prime spot, maybe a bush or a snag or something or other, might give the rod tip a little tap or 3 to see if I can grab a bite, but here I'm generally waiting as long as it takes for all the ripples to clear.
Straight away, see that? Bang. 2, going after it again, bang.
If nothing, I'll then wind the reel with a raised rod tip and tug at the tip of the rod to impart an erratic positive surface action. I'll do this for about 5 to 7 meters so that any fish within a 10-meter radius know the lure is there, and there is 0 doubt if the fish is feeding that it doesn't know it's there. I'll then dead stop the lure over some feature and wait. Kind of like an injured fish is taking a rest, and as soon as I stop it, I'm watching for boils, follows, sign directly behind that lure. So what happens if I see a follow? Well, I'll slowly take up the slack of the line, and then with the rod tip down, I'll tap the lure down slowly a couple of times. Now, that'll get the lure about 4 to 6 inches under the surface. And typically what that looks like, the lure will sit like this. You're gonna tug on the line and the lure's gonna come down like that. It'll raise up slowly and then it'll come down like that. And again, we're lowering that lure down to in front of the fish's face so that it is easier to convince to eat the lure.
Yeah, there's a fish on that. There you go. Alright, I reckon that's another EP.
If I see no sign, I'll raise the rod tip and tug on the rod again for another 5 to 7 meters, and I'll work the lure in the same manner all the way back to the boat. So that's the technique. It's not a particularly hard one. You peg it out, you attract the fish on the surface, and then when you know you've got a fish behind it, just tap it down, get it down in front of the fish's mouth, and catch the fish subsurface. There's no other lure out there that does that at the moment, converts from a surface to a subsurface lure in the same cast. And that's really where this lure stands out. Right, so a couple of final points before we wrap this up. The first is that there's a bunch of different lures out there. Because the OSP Bent Minnow is a $38 lure, it's opened the market up for brands to come in underneath it with similar design. Now, this channel is always about my personal experiences and the path that I've taken, and I've taken that path where I've tested the other ones and given those bad boys a go. I will say generally they either sit differently in the water or there's something about them that might not swim in the unique way that the Bent Minnow does. Those paths have all led me back to the Bent Minnow. I'd encourage you to give them a go, particularly if 38 bucks is just a little bit too much for you to spend. Now, the other thing I'll talk about here is the test of the trebles and their corrosion I mentioned before. So on one side here, we've got the decoys, and on the other, you can see the stock trebles that come with the Bent Minnow. You can make the assessments for yourself as to what has corroded more or less, or whether there's any difference. So one might look as though it's suffered more from corrosion than the other, when in fact the background on one is white and silver, so it's going to stand out more. Now, you'll notice that there's a bunch of EP getting caught on this lure in this video, and that's because the lure is so versatile. I've seen flathead completely breach with an open mouth out of the water. Their entire bodies are out, now just committing to the Bent Minnow. The lure is really strong in both fresh, salt water and brackish environments, and out of all the lures in the lure pack on my shoulder, it's got to be one of the ones that I recommend the most. For me, Bent Minnows are really about risk and reward. It's a high risk of losing something quite expensive, but the amount of fish it catches is insane. As always, I hope you've enjoyed the video. You know the buttons to push if you're into that. Stay safe. I'll see you next time.
There we go. That's very shallow.